52 episodes, 52 ordinary people, 52 real stories about things that affect overall health. Because there is a lot more that goes into being healthy than food and fitness. Inspiration, support, a new perspective, and knowledge. You'll find that and more here on the Healthability Project.
Hi, welcome to the Healthability Project. I'm Robin McKenna. The adoption process covers the gamut of emotions. The to-do and the to-know list can be very overwhelming. The stress of having to contend with state and local laws and having to make difficult decisions along the way. There are so many unknowns. And then there is the day you bring your child or your children home. The pendulum of emotion swings back the other way to sheer joy, happiness, and excitement. My guest today is Frank Freda. Frank is a happily married father of two. He works in customer service management and is a professional interview coach. Frank is also a musician. He has independently released several albums and occasionally produces remixes for others. Thank you so much for joining me today, Frank. I'm so excited for us to talk. Frank and his wife navigated the process of adoption. So Frank, I'll turn it over to you. We'd love to hear your story, your journey about the decision you and your wife came to, navigating it, and where you are today.
Robin, thank you so much for having me. It is my absolute pleasure to be speaking with you about this topic, as I know that when we were going through the process that it was extremely daunting, and the support of others and the encouragement of others really helped to buoy our spirits and to give us hope. And that's really one of the biggest things in this whole process, is that you have to have hope. We met a little bit later in life and started our family later, like a lot of couples are doing these days for various reasons. And due to the fact that we were both a little bit older, we both had certain factors that made it difficult for us to conceive on our own. We explored some fertility options and were unsuccessful, and looked at other options such as maybe a donor egg. And after considering all of the options, it kind of went back to something that really my wife honestly suggested from the get-go, which was that we should go with adoption. And I was a little bit hesitant at first. And it was a little bit difficult because I struggled with whether or not I would be able to bond with a child that was not biologically my own. And I kind of had an epiphany one day when I realized how much I love my wife, and she is obviously not genetically, biologically related to me at all, and realized that I had just kind of set up an obstacle for myself that didn't need to be there. One of the things that I heard throughout our journey was that one of the things that was said to women that were looking was, do you want to be pregnant, or do you want to have a family? Do you want to have a baby, or do you want to have a family? And sometimes it's getting over those mental roadblocks of your, forgive the pun, preconceived notions about how your family would begin, and then realizing that there were alternate paths to get there. So for us, after we kind of went through that process, and I think it's important to mention too, that there are stages of mourning in the process, both for myself and I know for my wife, and it's different for everybody, but there is a period where you have to kind of go through the acceptance of the fact that you're not going to have your own biological child. And that can be difficult. And you need to come to terms with that.
That's so interesting that you say that. I have never heard of that part of the journey for adoption. I do know some people who have been adopted and some people who have adopted, and I have never heard anybody discuss that. So that is really very interesting. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Thank you. And again, different for everybody. Some folks who are perfectly able to conceive make the wonderful choice of saying, well, there are children out there that need families, and they just decide to adopt from the get-go as well. So once we came to the conclusion that adoption was the way for us to go. We had to decide which route we were going to take. And there are several that you can take. You can go through the foster system and see if there are children that are available that you can foster and then adopt through the state. We were living in New York at the time. You can also go the route of dealing with an agency where you are using all of their resources to get you in front of as many, potential mothers or expectant mothers. Or then there's the third option, finally, which is what we chose, which was private adoption, where you're basically working with a lawyer and then you're going out and you're trying to bring someone to find you and kind of do that on your own with various different methods.
And what swayed you towards private adoption versus the other options?
Well, we were surprised because we wound up connecting with an attorney and went for a consultation. And I did not think that it was going to be possible for us to, say, get a newborn child to begin with. I was I was very ignorant about a lot of things about the process. And I thought, well, there's no way we're going to be able to get a newborn child. It's probably going to be, somewhat older than that. But the attorney said, no, actually, it's common that you can connect with someone who is even expecting to have their child. And what made the difference for us was that when you are working with an agency, you're part of, say, their portfolio of people that they're trying to connect. And you're, for lack of a better term, you're in competition with all those other hopeful couples or individuals that are looking to adopt. And we decided that we were going to go with private adoption because we wanted to funnel people to just look at us and make their decision just based on their feeling about us. And if they spoke to us and visited our website and, what on a gut level they felt, this is the couple that I feel like I need to reach out to and learn more about.
I would also think, too, the private adoption and being somewhat less competitive in a way than going through an agency, just knowing there's that less competition is somewhat of a relief.
It is, because I liken it to if you are looking for, if you're shopping for anything really, that if you get to the point of information overload, things start to kind of blur together and you don't remember, for instance, if you were looking at cars as an example, which features one manufacturer had versus another and getting them confused. And it's already overwhelming. And now add to that the emotional component of now we're talking about a child. It's so much more complicated.
Right. Emotional fatigue to the 10th degree.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So once you decided that private adoption was the way that you would go, what was the next set of steps that you and your wife went through?
There were a lot of things that seemed to be kind of serendipitous. For us, it was kind of like once we were both on board with choosing this path, it seemed like opportunities presented themselves to us or things seemed to happen in a way that seemed coincidental, but too good to be true kind of thing. Okay. And we were very fortunate. I'll say up front, there are some people who will look for years and some people have shorter journeys. We were very fortunate. Speaking about from the point where we started to adopt, our journey to start having a family probably started a good year or two before we had agreed to move forward with adoption. But once we had met with that attorney, we had found that there was a Facebook group called Mommy Angels. And our attorney's name was Lori Goldheim, located in New York. Absolutely wonderful. Can't recommend her enough. And we got turned on to this Facebook adoption group called Mommy Angels. And it turned out that their very next meeting was going to be occurring at a location that was walking distance from our house. And furthermore, the guest speaker at that next meeting was our attorney that we had just retained.
Wow.
We went to the meeting and, we're very encouraged. And an interesting thing is that, things that your perceptions about things and your emotional roller coaster, there were a lot of children at that meeting. And at first that struck me as odd. And I was a little bit frustrated by it. And then it was brought out that all of the people that were there with those children had come to earlier meetings without them.
Wow.
So those were success stories.
Yes. Yes. Wow. That must
And
have really, validated your decision and gave you a much higher comfort zone about the whole thing.
absolutely, it really did. And the other major factor in our journey was that there was someone there from a company called Tech Adoption, which is TEKK adoption.com. And it was started by someone who had gone through the adoption process with his partner, happened to be an IT professional, and realized that there really weren't websites hosting that catered to this niche. And so he had all of these services available. And we had created our own website on Wix. My wife did a beautiful job of designing the website, and we worked together on the content for it, of what we wrote. And then we spoke to Ben, the owner from Tech Adoption. And one of the things that he did, and I highly recommend, was Google Ads, because anybody can put up a website, but if people don't see it, it's useless. So we were aggressive. We went with a recommended budget of $500 a month. And what that meant was that when people were searching for adoption, that our site would come up, pretty high in your Google results. And one of the things that they did was they would put in certain keywords, and they would also eliminate certain keywords. Because for instance, if you Google adoption, you're probably going to see a lot of things for pets as well. So that was definitely key for us as well.
It sounds like you had really right out of the gate a tremendous level of resource. And it seemed that, you mentioned synchronicity earlier, but it does seem very synchronous, if that's a word even, that that these people crossed your path when you needed that type of a resource.
Right. It really did. And there were things that we decided to do as a result of that meeting that were very helpful. Again, being completely ignorant to things, you think of all of the ways that you thought of to approach this, and then you hear all of the things that you had no idea that you could do. For instance, we had business cards, and it had our contact information and our website. And this wonderful group would do card drops where they would go to stores or go to airports, and they would drop your cards, because you never know who's going to see that. And maybe they know someone who is considering adoption. And now, okay, here's a potential couple that is worth investigating. The other things that we did were Craigslist. We also did a Facebook page. We did YouTube, Instagram. We also joined two websites. One was called Adopt Match and another one called Adoptimist. And I think that and we also, because there are some states and some places where you might have, say, grandparents who read the newspaper and might know somebody, or a friend of a friend. So we picked several states based on recommendations from someone who was knowledgeable. And we actually did print ads as well.
And then I would assume you would have to bring yourself up to speed on adoption laws in those states, if that's indeed where you ended up making the match, right? Because it's not the same state to state.
It is different from state to state. We certainly relied on our attorney for that. I will say, from the legal standpoint, for us, living in Suffolk County in New York, you actually have to go through the court system and be fingerprinted and have a background check, and the court has to sign off that you can adopt. And part of that process was also meeting with a social worker as well, who had to give us the seal of approval that, yes, this couple are a stable couple, and that their home is an environment that would be suitable for children.
Wow, that's very reassuring.
Yes, and intense.
Oh, I can imagine. So what happens? So you get the website up, and you're starting to receive a lot of traffic onto your page. Was there a big process of weeding out, and was that overwhelming? Did you just happen to make the connection right away? How many connections did you have?
We had several connections. It was one of the ways that people connect with us was they could send a message through the website. They could call us. They could also text us. Like we tried to avail ourselves of every technology, and also knowing that probably, some of the potential expectant mothers might be younger and might be more comfortable with texting than with an actual, voice call. We wanted to make it as easy as possible. What's that?
Human connection, as I like
Human
to say.
connection. Yes, absolutely. And we were very fortunate that we were getting a lot of hits, so to speak. It's a big funnel, and we were getting tens of thousands of hits a month, I believe, on the website. And out of those tens of thousands of hits, maybe a handful of people would actually go so far as to reach out to us. And one of the things that you need to be prepared for, unfortunately, is that you will run into some people who are looking to take advantage of your fragile state. We had someone ask us for, I think, $50,000 to be a surrogate for us. Other people that were, just kind of sketchy, like we would listen to people and, sometimes things just wouldn't feel right, or people would talk to you for a little while and then they would disappear, and, you would kind of like let them, kind of fall by the wayside. We tried not to chase anybody. Like we really wanted somebody to be comfortable with us and want to move forward, because, we tried to understand as best as we could what an emotional decision it was for them.
It sounds like you got savvy very quickly. And speaking of fragile state, did you feel that you and your wife were in a fragile state? More vulnerable state than you would not have been in had you not gone down this road?
I think the unknown is the hardest part, because you don't know how long the process is going to take. And when you're going through it, you find yourself saying, is this ever going to happen? Are we ever going to connect with the right person? Are they going to find us? Are we going to find them? And you would have, times where it would be quiet and you wouldn't be hearing from anyone. And you would think, okay, I guess, maybe this is it. And you would maybe start talking about, okay, let's see how it goes. And I think at one point we actually said to each other, we were getting very frustrated, and we had discussed the possibility of picking a date that we were going to stop, just for the psychological aspect of saying, okay, one way or another, this is our end date. If it doesn't work out by this date, we're just going to move on. Because I think that we needed for us to kind of have that line in the sand of saying, we can only endure this for so long. And if it's not going to work out emotionally, financially, we may just need to come to an acceptance of it.
That's a very sound, very wise strategy. Did somebody suggest that to you, or is that something that you and your wife came up with on your own?
Just on our own, just through conversations. We would take walks and we would talk about things. And, that was just one of the topics that came up on one of our walks was, how much longer are we going to do this? And just, I don't know how long I can do this, because it really does wear on you. It's exhausting. It's a marathon of emotion.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine. You talk about uncertainty, and it's uncertainty coupled with this giant ball of hope. It's hard, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And I have to give my wife a ton of credit, because it makes sense that when an expectant mother would reach out to us, that my wife would be the one that would speak to them. And, of course, she put a lot of pressure on herself to do well in those conversations and to say the right thing and ask the right questions and, to be warm and welcoming. And that can be difficult, because you want people to like you. You want them to perceive you as, a possible forever home for their child. And that's a lot to be put on your shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was wonderful with it. She had lots of calls with lots of different people that didn't go anywhere, or, potential scammers or situations that we had to walk away from. And it takes a toll. It does.
Did you and your wife do anything along the way, related to self-care to give yourself a little break here and there to just to make sure you did the mental, overall health and well-being check-in to kind of do something for yourself from time to time?
I think through the group, we kind of got that support. In retrospect, I think it may have been helpful if we had gotten a little bit more support because we kind of, we're really kind of in it together, just the two of us for a lot of it. And it's one of those things that it's one of those situations where family and friends mean well and they mean to be supportive. But it's kind of like when you're unemployed and you're looking for a job, or you're single and you're looking for a partner, and people are asking you, "Oh, how's it going? Have you had any interviews? Have you met anybody?" And they mean well, but sometimes it just feels like another dagger in your heart that no, we haven't heard anything, and we tell you if there was news. We're not holding out on you, but sometimes those questions just are constant reminders of no, we haven't found anybody yet. No, we don't know when this is going to happen. We're frustrated and we know you're curious and you're hopeful for us, but that's not helping.
Yeah, it's like a painful help.
Yeah. And trying to remind yourself that, people mean well and that they love you and they're asking because they love you and they're not trying to drive you crazy.
So just because you and I spoke in advance of the actual conversation we're having right now, you were incredibly lucky in that you connected with two birth mothers.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that and then the journey with each of them, because it was different.
Very different. So I mentioned before, just to kind of go back to the timeline, that we had met with our attorney in February of 2017. And I think within a couple of weeks, we signed the retainer. The Mommy Angels meeting, I believe, was in April. And in May was when my wife finished the website and we made that live. And again, she did an amazing job on the website. We connected with our first expectant birth mother in July. So it was only a couple of months later of the website and specifically the Google ads, via tech adoption, that we connected with our first birth mother, who was located in Georgia. And my wife made a good connection with her and felt comfortable with her. And they talked several times. And we decided, of course, it would be a good idea to meet face to face. So we took a trip down to Georgia.
Is that common that in private adoption that you would meet face to face with the birth mother in advance or well in advance of the birth?
It is common, but again, it varies.
Okay.
It varies. Some people will only talk by phone, or maybe video chat. It really depends on the situation and everybody's comfort level and the means, and also keeping in mind whether or not the birth mother is open to the adoption being open or closed, meaning whether or not she wants to have contact with you afterwards. Okay. And obviously, we didn't go through it during the early stages of COVID, but I'm sure it was probably maybe more difficult for people to have face-to-face meetings during that time.
Right.
But for us, we knew that it was important that we wanted to sit across the table from someone and look them in the eye and speak with them and see what that feeling was, between all of us and what the comfort level was.
Was there any concern for the physical health of the birth mother? I mean, maybe even before you met the birth mothers that you did connect with. I mean, I would think that most people would be concerned whether or not the person was masking drug use or drinking or mental health issues. Did you and your wife talk about that at all?
We did. And we talked about several things. To backtrack for a moment, the more open that you are, the more you increase your chances. Nothing is going to be, say, perfect or exactly what you imagine in your mind. For us, for instance, we were open to a child of any ethnicity or gender or nationality. We were hoping that the baby would be healthy. That was our biggest concern. And we were just going to, kind of see what came to us, so to speak. And we tried to just make it that healthy was our number one concern. Obviously you want to know as much as you can about the birth mother. And what you can about the birth father. And in some cases, you'll know some things and sometimes you won't. We were fortunate in that both of our expectant birth mothers were cooperative in sharing their medical records with us and their past histories. And we were able to, review those things and see if there was anything that, we were concerned about or that we wanted to talk about, and make sure that we were comfortable. And that is definitely part of the process. There are some people who, want to make sure that, say, for instance, someone never had any issues of any kind. And then there are some people that are just, willing to accept any situation. It's a very, very personal, individual, kind of choice.
Okay, so you connected with the first birth mother in July, and when did you connect with the second birth mother?
So the second birth mother, I remember the specific date because it would have been my parents' wedding anniversary. It was August 14th. And that was ironically, it was the second expectant mother that we connected with, but it was the first of the children to actually be born.
Oh, wow.
So that was in August that we connected with her, and she was located in New Jersey, which I mentioned we were in New York, so it was a lot easier to drive to see her.
Okay. The second birth mother delivered first. The arrival of the babies was pretty close together. Your two sons.
Yes. It was pretty wild. They were actually both due towards the end of December. And the irony was that, again, that the one that we connected with second actually came along first. He was actually born a month premature. That was our son, Leonardo, from New Jersey. And we were scheduled to go down to the town in New Jersey. She was going to have a scheduled C-section. But on Thanksgiving Day, we got the call from the birth father saying, she's going to the hospital now. It's going to be an emergency C-section. You need to come now. And I literally felt like I was in a sitcom because I ran through every room in the house trying to find, like our travel stuff, because we didn't have a travel bag put together yet because we weren't expecting to leave until the next week. And I kept finding that I was running in and out of rooms, but not picking anything up and just didn't know what to do with myself. And we got in the car and we got to the hospital about 2 hours after he was born. And, we walked into the maternity ward and we looked through the window and we saw our son for the first time sleeping, in that little area where the babies are. And we just started weeping with joy. And we were just so overwhelmed that there he is.
Wow. That's beautiful. Yeah. Now, again, not understanding the process of private adoption, was there, at that point in the process, is there any worry or concern that it could not actually take place? Or is it a done deal?
No, it's definitely not a done deal at that point, because there is a certain amount of time, and again, it could vary by state, where the birth mother has to sign the paperwork saying that she is voluntarily, putting the child into adoption with us. And then furthermore, there are interstate laws that say that a child cannot be transported across state lines until the appropriate authorities in both states sign off on it. So we actually had to stay in New Jersey until our lawyer said, okay, you can come home now. Which was another one of those things that you learn about along the way, that, it's not as simple as just like, okay, we can go home now. And because it was Thanksgiving, we didn't have our reservation for the hotel until the following week. And we actually had a little trouble finding a place Thanksgiving night.
Wow. Yeah, I bet. Wow.
But, everything worked out. And, a couple of days after he was born, he came out of the hospital with us and went to the hotel room with us.
What was it like that first night, you and your wife? What was going through your minds?
We were so exhausted and excited and happy. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified that I am now responsible for this child. And because he was a month premature, he was so tiny that the first time I held him, his head fit in my hand completely like an apple. He was so tiny and so fragile that that made me even more nervous than I would have been if he had been full term.
Right.
And I remember distinctly that we put him in the little travel bassinet that we had, and I sat on the end of the bed and pretty much watched him all night long.
Did that experience make it ever so slightly easier when you went just a few weeks later to bring home your second son?
Actually, I think it made it harder. And
Okay.
the reason I say that is because what wound up happening is after we spent about 10 days in New Jersey and we were finally able to come home, I was able to take a week or two off. And then there was the Christmas holiday and work was closed for the holiday. And we knew that our second son, that they were going to schedule to induce labor. So we knew when we needed to be there. And we got the call a couple of days before. So I went back to work on December 26th and 27th. And then we got on a plane and went down to Tennessee. Mm. And what this meant is that we have a newborn and we can't take him with us.
And that was the state law at the time?
Well, not because of the state law. I mean, we were okay to take him anywhere, but it was just the logistics of, okay, now we're going to be at the hospital with our other son's expectant mother, and there's no way that we could be caring for him at the same time. Okay. So we made the difficult but practical decision to leave Leo with my oldest sister, and her and all of my family chipped in to help take care of him for the 2 weeks or so that we wound up being in Tennessee, because although she lived in Georgia, the hospital was actually just across the border in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Oh. And the other reason that made it more difficult was that I think that we were a little bit emotionally fatigued.
Yeah.
From the insane amount of stress and the unknown to the excitement and joy of having Leo. And now we've left him to go down there. And it was a little bit difficult. And that was
by the physical
hard.
Fatigue as well.
Yes, it was definitely exhausting. But this second birth had some other joyous things about it as well, one of which was that my wife got to be the birth coach, and she got to be in the delivery room and got to be there when our second son, whose name is Dylan, was born. So
that's a real gift.
We missed 2 hours of Leo's, first day, but other than that, he's been with us. And, for Dylan, from the moment he emerged, we were there. So that was something, particularly special about, his coming to us, is that she got to be there for that specific moment.
Wow. So there's a lot of stress, obviously, in this process, learning laws and all kinds of things, and, maybe reading up on how to be a parent and just getting ready physically and emotionally and just technically, whatever. But how did your relationship with your wife change at all during all of this stress and nervousness?
I think that it helps you if you have a strong relationship like we do, that it helps to strengthen it even further, and that how and when to pick each other up, especially in those moments. If one of you is feeling down, the other one has to be the cheerleader in that moment, because it can be difficult if both people are feeling, depressed or anxious about it. And then, of course, conversely, if you have a relationship that has its difficulties already, this is going to amplify those things as well. So to your point earlier, I think it would have been extremely helpful if we had maybe a little bit more support, from an objective standpoint, but thankfully, our relationship was strong, and, we were able to weather those ups and downs, and not get too low. I do remember that there was one of those walks where we were having that conversation about, I don't know how much longer I can do this, and maybe giving up. And we hadn't had calls in a couple of days. And then I think then the next day is when we got the call from the woman who turned out to be Dylan's mom.
Wow. But you raise a great point, though, is keeping the line of communication between yourself and your partner, your wife, your husband, whomever it is, open and being real and honest with each other as you're going through it and really holding nothing back, because this is really, all or nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing to keep in mind too, is that, when we connected with each of the expectant mothers, when we had discussed having a family, we had talked about the possibility of having 2 children. We didn't go into it expecting to adopt 2 children right away. And then when the opportunity presented itself, we agreed that we were going to pursue both of those situations, because the reality, as you pointed out, is that you don't know what's going to happen. And we could have wound up with neither of them, only one of them, or both, like we did. And that's for a variety of reasons. God forbid something happens with the health of the mother or the baby, or if the expectant mother changes her mind and decides that she wants to keep the child or she wants to place them with another couple. There are a lot of different things that can happen, where the outcome isn't what you're looking for.
Now, obviously, you've changed in the sense that you're now a father, and not only a father of 1, but a father of 2 little boys. But how do you think the process changed you as a person? Does it make you just have a different perspective on life? Did it help you to really understand what's important to worry about and what's not, or anything else?
Oh, a lot. It's very true that you can think that you've thought of how your life will change, but you really have no idea in many different ways. I tried to envision what it would be like and try to, prepare myself for all of the potential, good, bad, and otherwise that was going to come with it. But, I look back at my naive self and say, you were such a fool. It's, so much more, in so many ways. I love them so much more than I could have possibly imagined. They stress me more than I could have possibly imagined. Now that they're here, I can't imagine being without them, as much as they drive me crazy at times, which they do. Being an older dad, it definitely made me think about my mortality, because when they were born, Leo in November and then Dylan 5 weeks later in December, and then my birthday was in January, I was turning 47.
Okay.
And then you start doing the math. Okay, well, when they graduate high school, I'm going to be 65.
Wow. Yeah.
Or if they go to college, I'm going to be close to 70. And then I start thinking, am I going to be there? If they decide to get married or if they decide to have children, would I see my grandchildren? And I hadn't really ever stressed about that before, thinking about how long I would live. I wasn't worried about dying or, my longevity, but from the context of how long I can be there for them and how much I want to be able to see of their lives and, what happens with them.
That's an extenuation of the hope that that was born out of the process, right? The hope that just continues to grow as they grow.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that was a little bit eye-opening for me, and that, it made me think about that. And, you definitely, as an older parent, an older first-time parent, there are other things to take into consideration as well, in that if we had children, for instance, when we were younger, that means that all of the uncles and aunts would have been younger and all of the grandparents would have been younger. Maybe some of them would have still been here, for instance. So having children at an older age isn't just about the fact that you are older, which has its pros and its cons. On the pro side, definitely much more mature and wiser than I would have been if I had a child in my 20s or 30s, for instance, but maybe not as physically fit and, having the same amount of stamina as I would have. So there's all those different things as well that come with it and being a first-time parent at an older age.
Well, it's an extraordinary experience that you've had. Do you have any advice for anyone or any couple that is considering this? If they're listening, hopefully they'll be listening.
I would say that it's first and foremost making sure that you're communicating with your partner, that you're on the same page about how you're approaching things and how you feel about any prospective connections that you make, that you're comfortable with whichever road you choose, whether it's private or, through an agency. I would say connecting with a group of people who have both been through the process and people who are currently going through the process, having that shared hope and shared stress can be extremely helpful, and having the wisdom of those who have gone through it, and the reassurance. And I really feel that for the majority of cases, or for lack of a better term, for the majority of people that are searching to start their families through adoption, that the only way it won't happen in most cases, not all, but most cases, is if you give up. So keeping that hope, kind of saying to yourself, this is a marathon. Our situation was very unusual that we connected and things happened so quickly for us. But just keeping in mind that your personal journey is going to be different from everyone else's, and just to be patient with each other, be kind with each other, just having that determination to keep moving forward every day and keeping your chin up and holding each other up, and hope. I just keep coming back to hope. Be hopeful.
That's just wonderful, wonderful advice. But I also think too, the strategy that you and your wife had around a timeline, where if it wasn't, if it didn't happen for you by a certain point, that you would pencils down and move on to another phase of your life. I think that's important, because sometimes you get stuck in the process, and if it doesn't happen, then that could whiplash as far as, just like a negative effect, right?
Absolutely. And a word that you used before is an image that I often use for myself. You mentioned the word pendulum earlier, I believe. And I always say to people when they mention to me that they're upset or that they're stressed, I say, life is a pendulum. Wherever it is at any given moment, it's not going to stay there forever. So if you're in a horrible place, it's going to swing back the other way. If things are great right now, it's not going to stay there either. But just knowing that it's going to change, whatever it is, to keep that in mind. And there was something else when we were discussing this, having children, not having children, we would have conversations about what was right for us and what we envisioned our lives to be. And I know for me, I won't speak for her, but for me, sometimes I can get stuck in a very black or white, all or nothing mentality, that it's got to be this or it's got to be that, and, not the gray, or not being able to see the positives of either situation. And I got to a point where I was able to say, either we're going to have a family and it's going to be great, or we're not going to have a family, or we're not going to have children. We're still a family, no matter what. The two of us, we're still a family.
Good point.
We're not going to have children, and it's going to be great. It'll just be great in a different way. If we have children, it'll be great in the experiences that we will have with them and raising them, and what they will teach us and what we'll experience. If we don't have children, our life will be great because we're going to travel and we're going to do other things that appeal to us. So I kind of got to a place where I could say, no matter what happens, we're going to have a great life. Just one is going to be different than the other. And in either situation, you may always wonder what your life would have been like if you had gotten the other.
Right.
And just trying to be at peace with that.
Yeah. That's a very healthy outlook, that either way, it's going to be great, because it is what you make of it.
Right. And knowing that the most important thing for me was that I'm with the love of my life, my favorite person in the whole world. And whichever road we wound up going down, I was going to be happy, and hoping that she would be happy too.
And now there are 4 of you.
Now there are 4 of us. Yes.
Frank, thank you so much for your time today. This has been probably one of the most wonderful conversations I've had for the Health Ability Project. So thank you so very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope that it helps to encourage people and give them hope and strength in their journeys.
Thank you. I'm sure that it will. Listeners, hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. If you do, please like us, share us, and tell your friends about us. Get on that social media and spread the word. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email me at thehealthabilityproject@gmail.com. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today at the Healthability Project. We'd love to hear from you, so please email us your questions, comments, or suggestions, including future guests, to thehealthabilityproject@gmail.com. And please like us, subscribe, and share us with your friends.